My name's Nikki van der Gaag, or van der Gaag in Dutch, and I'm Director of Gender Justice and Women's Rights here at Oxfam. Very simple answer and a very complex answer. Very simple answer is that, women make up half the world's population, and if you ignore women, you ignore half the world's population. It doesn't make sense on any kind of level, whether that's on a human rights level, on an economic level. There's just no justification for it. So, if we're going to end poverty, we have to focus on ending gender inequality at the same time. Not before, not after, but at the same time. Well, where to start? The United Nations said last year, I think, that it would take 80 years to achieve gender equality. I already thought that was far too long. But when we're looking at some of the specific statistics, things are actually going backwards. For example, with the gender pay gap, at one stage it was 120 years, I think 5 years ago. It's now 170 years until we're going to close that. So one of the other specific things is around the global Gaag rule, which will restrict family planning services to the poorest women on earth. It will lead to more women dying. That's another huge reversal of women's sexual and reproductive health and rights. And there are a number of other things like that where there really is a danger of a reversal. We're looking at cuts to women's refuges, we're looking at cuts to funding directly to women's rights organisations. There's a whole landscape out there which is particularly challenging to grassroots women's organisations and to women as a whole. I think you absolutely need to do both. I think one of the things that strikes me about Oxfam is that sometimes we portray the work with women as being out there in other countries, in the countries we work in, and it absolutely is. But actually some of the broad issues around women's rights and gender justice are similar, and I think it's really important that it's not just out there, that each one of us thinks about how that relates to our own lives. In the last 5 or 6 years, I seem to have done a lot more work on how you involve men on gender equality. Partly because there have been various stages where I've been visiting women and girls, and men have been and young men have been outside saying, well, what about us? Can you work with us? And it dawned on me that actually if we don't work with these men, there's a very instrumentalist reason for the fact that we won't achieve women's rights, and that is that the women we're working with, the young women, will marry those men, and those men will be behaving in exactly the same way as they always did. But there's another reason too, I think, and that is that we know that the more people you can get together to change things, the powerful and the oppressed, the more things are likely to change. Absolutely. I've been a feminist since my teens, and I've seen kind of waves of feminism over the years where, it's been a dirty word and then it's been something more acceptable, and now there's a new young generation of feminists who are out there on social media who are absolutely proud to call themselves feminists, and increasingly a number of men who say they're pro-feminist or feminist as well. So I think that's really important. I think we need to use the word, we need to not be frightened of it. So, hopes for women's rights. It's very simple. I just want us to live in a world where men and women are equal. I think Oxfam has a major contribution to make here. We've been working with women and women's organisations for many, many years now, 20 or 30 years. And we're very rooted in many of those communities. We work in partnership with them. We have examples of what we've done well and what we've needed to improve. We also work in partnerships with other organisations that support women. So I think partnerships for me is absolutely key, whether that's local or international. But I do think there's a real possibility that if together we can look at the global and the local, we can work with what's going on in the UK, we can work with what's going on in the countries we work in, there's a real chance for change.